Hello, everyone. Welcome back to episode third of the India series on the Soaring Tales. I'm your host, Dr. Shivangi Mishra, and I'm so glad you all are here with us today. In an age of satellites, AI, and massive ecological datasets, there are still a handful of people who understand nature the old fashioned way by walking through forests, observing patiently, asking questions, and returning to the same landscapes year after year, decade after decade. Today's guest is one of those rare individuals. For more than 40 years, Peter Smetacek sir has dedicated his life to studying butterflies, moths, forests, and ecosystems of the Indian Himalaya. As the founder of the Butterfly Research Center in Bhimtal, he has not only documented remarkable biodiversity and contributed to the discovery and understanding of species, but has also shown that how these delicate insects can reveal the health of entire ecosystems. Today, we are honored to be joined by one of India's most respected naturalists, Shri Peter Smetacek, sir. Thank you for joining us
Thank you.
today. Thank you for your
It's a
time.
pleasure joining one of the outstanding vulture researchers of India. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, sir. And without further ado, I will start the conversation. Sir, I want to start not with the butterflies, but with the person behind the butterflies. When we look at the work of great naturalists, there is often a childhood curiosity that comes first before any subject or science. So, what was your earliest connection with the natural world?
My father came from a background of forest people. They ran the forests in Germany and Austria before the First World War. And so they were forest people. They lived and worked and breathed forests. And when he came to India, he settled on a forest estate. And being brought up in such an area, there was a collection of butterflies on the walls of his room. Initially, it was butterflies, later, it expanded to butterflies and moths because in the 1960s and early 70s, there was no electricity, so we used to use kerosene lamps. And
Mm.
moths would not be attracted to kerosene lamps. But when we got electricity, then we started looking at moths also.
Yeah.
So yeah, then there were moths in his room. So that was an inspiration enough. And I would help him identify what he had collected. And I lived in a different town, Nainital, where we used to study. And I would come down on weekends and help my father with whatever he had got during the week. And then, of course, in Nainital, I would be going around with the net and I would bring down stuff. And it was quite nice to have somebody who's on your same wavelength. It
Yeah.
was a nice way to interact with a parent, to have
Yeah.
a common interest.
Yeah. That reminds me of like an intergenerational knowledge and wisdom transfer.
Definitely, definitely. Apprenticeship. I did an apprenticeship under my father. And
Wow.
that is actually the way to transfer knowledge.
Yeah, that's so beautiful because we often think that scientists or naturalists they begin with degrees or research questions, but it's always like beautiful to have that kind of connection which you had. Thank you for
Degrees give
sharing.
you, degrees basically impart, a degree certifies that you have received a certain amount of knowledge which his
Mm,
society is built on. And a PhD degree basically certifies that you understand research methodology. But the actual research you have to do after the degrees. Your actual life as a researcher starts after the PhD. That is
Absolutely.
just a qualification. That just
Yeah.
tells people, yes, you've been trained in the procedures,
Yeah, that's
isn't
so
it?
true. I can relate with
Yeah.
this. That's so true. Thank you for sharing that. So, over the
Yeah.
years, you often been described as a naturalist. What does being a naturalist mean to you?
Titles and classifications is hard. I mean, although I'm spending my life classifying insects, but I don't like to be classified. So don't consider that I would be, it would be a good thing to put me in this box or in that box. I do various things. I used to run a trekking agency when I was young in my late teenage, and all sorts of other things I did in my life. And a naturalist is somebody who's a very generalized knowledge of nature, usually justified by a love of nature. Love of nature is a very that you can actually specialize in several to specialize in so much to know about each individual field, as it were. But to connect them, there are few people, not many people, who actually can gather enough knowledge or information about the different fields to be able to connect them. And that is supposed to be what a naturalist does. But of course, how can you say? It's at various levels. No? So you have a naturalist who justifies his interest in nature by a love of nature and lack of knowledge. And then there's a person who has a greater knowledge and can't be fit into any other box. You're not an entomologist, you're not a botanist, you're not a climatologist, you're not a thisist or a thatist. Then you become a naturalist. So you're studying all of nature, isn't
Yeah,
it?
I love how beautifully you described it. That's,
Uh,
yeah, that's so insightful. And I like how you explain that perspective.
mm,
Yeah, because it also reminds me that natural history or natural world is not only about identifying species or doing that specific
no.
set of work. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll put it another way. And what you brought up this term natural history. Natural history actually is a non mathematical view of nature. And in this age of computers in the 1970s, because computers were moving in, so everything, in order to report any finding or to even make a finding, you would think in terms of representing it on a screen.
Hmm.
And there are a limited number of axes to your graph. So
Yeah.
um,
I-
you understand what I mean? But a natural history involves everything. So natural history you explain in sentences. Natural history is actually discussed in sentences, not in mathematical terms, not in statistical terms.
Yeah.
And that became anecdotal. But actually, it is the real science and the mathematical interpretation, which only takes a few factors into consideration and compares them. That that should be used as a support for natural history, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
It is not, but it has suddenly it has become the science. It's like in religion, you have a knowledge of nature, you have a knowledge of God. God is always formless. In every major religion, God is format. Nirakar Shakti. God doesn't have a shape in Christianity and Judaism. God doesn't have a shape in Islam, right? And then people, in order to understand them, they start representing them with idols. And then suddenly the idol becomes the God rather than what it was supposed to represent. So that way, mathematics has taken over science. So if you cannot represent it in rigorous mathematical terms, they call it anecdotal. But actually, anecdotal is the real thing because it takes into consideration all the variables. When you describe things in a sentence, you are taking into consideration different variables which are not represented. I mean, I understand that
Yeah.
statistically you can take 19 different variables into consideration, but there are more than 19 variables when you're interpreting nature.
Yeah.
So,
I can kind of understand. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Yeah.
no, you didn't interrupt. It's okay, but it's a thing that I think we have to go back to natural history in order to improve our understanding of nature rather than sticking to the possibility of mathematical interpretation and then reducing to that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's also
I'm
about,
done. Tell me.
yeah, relationships between the humans and more than humans, and in a very holistic way. And there is no way to, like you said, that there are not so many axes if you can try to interpret in that mathematical equation or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that would support your observation, but it's not actually the observation. What you derive from a mathematical representation is shouldn't be confused with the observation itself.
Yeah.
That can support an observation, that can help interpret an observation, but it's not the entirety. It's a part of that,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
That has been lost. It
Mm-hmm.
has been
So,
largely lost. Yeah.
yeah, you are kind of like connecting me with my next curiosity, that you have witnessed enormous changes in today's world. Today we have satellites, AI, and whatnot, like remote sensing and other ways we talked about to measure as in data sets. Where does the art of observation fit into that specific modern, so-called modern science?
Um,
Do you think that there are things we can
well,
only
okay.
learn by spending time in nature? I'll stop here.
Obviously, if you you see, if your task is understanding nature, then you have to observe it and understand it. If you go in with a preconceived set of what would you call it? If you have a intention of making a mathematical representation, then you decide on observing certain features of nature or your study subject because you have to represent it on a graph, right?
Right.
So then you focus on those features to the detriment of the other things that you might have noticed if you hadn't gone in with a preconceived notion. So when you go into a situation with a preconceived notion because you want to look at that particular aspect of it, by
Mm.
all means, nobody's saying that you go in with a blank mind always,
Mm.
but you have to be open to other observations too and variables. But if you say, no, no, ignore the variable because that's not part of what we are focusing on, if you go in too focused, you come back with preconceived results because you're only looking for data, you're cherry picking information, you're only looking for data which supports your hypothesis.
Yeah.
And you come back with that instead of going into nature with an open mind. You don't go looking for something, you go with an open mind for a walk or just to go there. And then along the way, when you see things, then you begin to notice them and understand them in their context, and then report what you observed in their context rather than go in with a preconceived frame and say, I am looking for how many times a wolf walks down a particular path or something like that,
Yeah.
and then come back with that number in your brain, but you didn't observe anything else.
Yeah.
And I would stress also that in India, at least, we have a horrible way of research funding where you are supposed to give expected results. You give a research proposal and you're supposed to give expected results. And stupidly, your results should match your expected results. Otherwise, they don't like it. If you say, well, I thought that this would happen, but actually when I made my experiments and made the observations, it turns out that that was wrong, then you'll be blacklisted from any further funding. So you
Yeah.
have to go and support expected results. I'll give you a small example. There was a PhD student in Gujarat, and she wanted to study, her PhD topic was the butterflies of a particular national park, right? So she applied to the chief wildlife warden as per procedure to ask for permission to survey the butterflies of the park. And the reply she got from them was classic. They said, please supply a list of butterflies you wish to survey.
Oh my goodness. No.
And that's the chief wildlife warden. Huh? Please, please supply a list of butterflies you wish to survey, and then we'll give you permission for it. So,
I don't know why they do that, but this is really sad. And this kind of
yeah.
this thing kills the spark
Yeah.
of
So
original.
it's in the hands of people who do not understand anything, and the result is as you would expect. You get no results. We are spending a huge amount of money on biodiversity, understanding biodiversity and this and that, but the results are nil. Nil. When I'm collating information for the catalog of butterflies, the information is I have to disregard large amounts of so-called published lists because it's so obviously wrongly identified, and that would cause a lot of trouble if you include a wrongly identified
Yeah,
species in a list. Then getting it off the list is practically impossible because you can't go back and say, oh well, that was misidentified, now we take it off the list. It's not that easy.
yeah. And it's
You
not
have a
also a right practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a mess, no? But then, well, one does what one can, and then these are
Mhm.
little problems that crop up along the way.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So one thing I always think about, like that fascinates me, that experience people like you, because you have spent like decades in the forest, you often notice changes before they appear in reports and data sets. So a forest communicates with many signals. When you enter a forest, what are the first things you notice?
I don't know if many of your viewers will understand what I'm going to say, but if you enter a forest, there is a certain feeling in the forest, and that is usually an expression of the sum total that would be called the health. And some forests are very calming. You go into that, you feel very calm. Some you feel unwanted. There are places where you just need to get out of there.
Yeah.
And so there are different of feelings. And I would explain it more in terms of if you meet a healthy person,
Mhm.
then you automatically feel happy. But if that person has some deep-rooted illness, has something, then that person sends out a bit of mixed signals, and you can instantly your your your
Yeah.
your what they call first impression. Your first impressions are lasting impressions.
Yeah.
Your first impression then is a bit different from what it would be if that person had been in very good health and active and happy. So
Hmm.
in the forest, it's the same thing. If you go into a forest, you will notice the feeling, and that can tell you a lot about the place. I
Yeah,
don't know how to explain it.
I can kind of understand that because in my
I
experience,
mean,
like people when they visit a forest, yeah, please, if you are saying
yeah,
something.
just for example, if you know people with gardens, you go to some people's gardens, they're happy gardens. It's a random thing of flowers and everything going on. But if you go to a public garden, for example, you will see very many more flowers, but
Yeah.
there's no feeling in them. You have flower beds with thousands of flowers, tulips or this or that flowering, but there's no feeling in them. It's color. It's a sheet of color. But then if you go into somebody's personal garden which has been cared for, the feeling is completely different.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and because it comes
yeah.
from you, so I would like to know more about it. Like what does a healthy ecosystem look like to you? Yeah.
You'll feel happy. You'll feel peaceful. You'll feel contented. You'll want to go back again and again to that place.
Sleepy time and I lie with my love by my side and she's breathing.
Yeah, that's true.
There's some places that call you back.
Mm-hmm. And for someone who is just visiting a forest occasionally and they can only see the beautiful landscapes, trees, plants, but because you are spending that much time in the forest and going back to the same landscape again and again, so I feel like you notice a lot more and connect a lot, and you can notice smaller changes also. So what are the early
Absolutely.
warning signs that an ecosystem is under stress?
Okay. There are some healthy systems in the sense of pristine forests, especially in the eastern Himalaya, where if you go into them, you feel unwelcome. Although everything is thriving, throbbing, perfect, there is no human interference, but you do feel unwelcome over there. And it's okay, it's the forest telling you to get lost. And then there are other forests where you go in, and when you see a forest which makes you happy or makes you peaceful, what you are subconsciously observing is enough nutrients for the plants, enough water for the plants, enough birds, enough insects, enough all that. You subconsciously get that whole picture, and that makes a complete, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like looking at paintings. Some paintings make you happy. Why is that? Because they have all sorts of interpretations that about the golden dimensions. I forget, golden triangle or whatever they call it. And then the thing should be there, and the framing of the photograph or the painting should be like that. But you look at it and you feel calm and peaceful and happy. So in the same way, if you go into a healthy forest or you meet a very healthy person, you feel nice. It gives a certain unified feeling.
Yeah.
Right? And if you go into a forest which has been pillaged and plundered and degraded, then it's a dead landscape. You have in India, you must have seen those forests where near villages, where the trees are reduced to toothpicks. They've cut all the foliage off to feed to the cattle. You must have seen those sort of things, right?
Yeah, right.
And those are just bare landscapes. There's nothing. There are no insects, there are no birds. It's just a bunch of toothpicks sticking up and maybe some undergrowth or some very overgrazed little bit of grass, a few centimeters tall, which is, the moment it grows a little more, you'll have cattle coming and grazing it. So those are dead landscapes. Those are dead areas. There's nothing over there. But if you go into a nice forest, and for example, in a protected area, you get a completely different feeling.
Yeah.
That's what they call forest bathing.
Yeah.
Nowadays, they have this thing called forest bathing. So you can't go forest bathing in a degraded forest. It won't work.
Yeah.
You're going to absorb those feelings which I'm talking about. Okay, now the question is, how do you break down that health into its components and then judge how healthy what is?
Yeah. Wow.
Then you break it down into the nutrient cycle. I'll just let her in. So you break it down into the unliving things. That is the nutrient cycle. The slope, if it's a hilly area, the slope aspect, the acidity of the soil, and so forth.
Yeah.
The structure of the soil, and then the living aspects. The living aspects are primarily the plants, and then everything else depends on the plants. Now, I was analyzing Himalayan oak forests. Now, Himalayan oak forests have 1,200 plant species growing there. Now, how do you judge the relative health, what a healthy population of the different 1,200 plants are? Sometimes, obviously, not all 1,200 are everywhere. In some places they are more, in some places they are less. Some oak forests have very little undergrowth when the canopy is dense. So obviously they have much fewer plant species, but there are 1,200 plant species associated with oak. And how do you decide whether this is healthy or not? So then obviously the thing became to look at who depends on those plants. Birds, of course, are large. They can fly long distances. They can feed on different things. And because they are present throughout the year, they have to depend on different aspects of their environment.
Yeah.
Insect eaters, for example, who are exclusive insect eaters, they will need a supply of insects throughout the year because birds hardly store fat.
Yeah.
It's not as if they can live for 6 months without eating or something like that, because they need to fly. They need to keep light. So the year-round presence of insectivores, of course, would tell you something. And similarly for berry eaters like barbets and stuff, if they are present at the year-round, it means there's a food supply around. So a healthy population of birds would give you an idea of the supply of all the various food.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, of course, if you want to go break it down further, then you can go down to insects, because birds can even then travel 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers a day. I mean, it's not a big deal for a bird. Of
Yeah.
course, many birds can travel much further and many birds travel less,
Yeah.
but they can travel. So maybe they're eating somewhere else and coming back and roosting here or whatever.
Yeah.
But if you look at insects, then they are very local. And of course, some insects are migrants, like the monarch and all that, but not everyone is a monarch. And there are many insects that live their whole lives on a bush. And if that bush is not there, or bushes of that species are not there, then those insects are not going to be found. So then different things would give you an insight into different aspects of the environment. And when you put that whole picture together, then you begin to form a mosaic, like little pieces put together make a scene. So the same way you put all these little things together, and then you get a picture of what the whole thing is all about.
Wow, that's so interesting. And how you explained it, I kind of like imagined. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, I feel always when I talk to you, I feel like I continue going on and on and listening to you. But yeah, let's jump on butterflies now. Connecting with forest. So most people see butterflies as symbols of beauty. But your work and as per my experience, how much I learned from you, they show that they are more than that, and they are connected to forests, climate, plants, and ecological processes, kind of what you just broadly said about insects and things. When did you begin seeing them not just as a species to document, but also as the indicators of ecosystem health?
Well, funnily enough, it came about through somebody trying to harm me.
Oh.
Um, my father had a collection, but in 1980, it got destroyed by museum beetles, right? So it was reduced to powder. And he was old, he couldn't rebuild it. So a couple of years, we didn't have a collection. We didn't have a pinned collection. And then I finished school and came down here, moved down here, and I started rebuilding the collection. Now, the early collection used to be in my father's room, and the museum beetles destroyed it because I didn't change the naphthalene in time. So my elder brother came along and said, but this time we're not going to let that happen. We're going to put in all sorts of insecticides and stuff, gamaxine and this and that, so that even if the naphthalene is not changed, no insects are going to dream of coming in. Good, but then because of that, it can't be in Dad's room. So he proposed, he had an empty room in his house. So he said, well, why not make it over there? And like a fool, I fell for that. And for the next 8 years, I rebuilt the collection. Now, it was easy for me because I revisited the places where I had recorded the earlier stuff and got the specimens at the right season. So I knew where to find what.
Yeah.
And then my father died, and this brother turns around and says, well, it's my collection. And he framed himself as the butterfly man of India and I don't know what. He knew nothing about butterflies. But he called himself that. And but the result was that I was in the middle of getting things identified. So I had voucher specimens in that collection, and I had sent similar ones to the British Museum for identification, etc., etc. And all that work went down the drain because I didn't have the voucher specimens anymore. And so I had to rebuild the collection. So for the third time, I set out to build the collection. So again, I went to the same places again. I got the things, and then I knew that, oh, you can find these things in the same place at the same time, again and again. And that helped me a lot, right?
Yeah.
I might not have had that realization if they had not made me do that.
I like it how how you shared that smiling with a smiling face. Like it's a big thing. And
The thing is, it's a philosophy which says when life throws rocks at you, don't throw the rocks back. You take the rocks and build a palace.
exactly. Yeah.
It's the practical application of that.
Hmm. There's always so much to learn from you. And yeah, I learned a lot from the discussions we had earlier. And thank you so much for, yeah, for your wisdom.
Experiences.
So, can butterflies reveal the ecological changes before
Yes, of course.
we detect them from
Yeah, yeah,
our
of
way?
course. Of course.
I would like to
Because
know more about it. How?
you need to know enough about the butterflies.
Uh,
If you know enough about them individually, the different species and the subspecies, if you understand enough about them, then you can understand why they're in an area, and you can also understand why they're not in an area. And you can understand the factors influencing that. And you can modify factors to ensure their introduction, or you can modify factors to stabilize their population, which might be eroding because of changing environmental factors. But you need to know enough about the thing. Nowadays, I understand there are a lot of people going around calling themselves bioindicator experts in the word. I had started this whole bioindicator thing rolling with a talk at Oxford in '91. And from there, I came back and I had applied for a Times Fellowship towards the rehabilitation of Indian rivers. And the idea was to use insect bioindicators to judge the health of forests in different parts of India.
mm,
And accordingly work out how to stabilize Indian water resources. Because basically, India is a very lucky country in that almost all our rivers, except the Brahmaputra and one tributary of the
mm,
Ganga, all the rest of our rivers begin in India and end in India, so we can control them.
mm,
So that was the idea. But then everybody jumped on the bandwagon and suddenly became bioindicator experts. My project proposals were hijacked.
mm.
So I stepped back.
Yeah.
There's no point giving out things to frauds. And of course, all this was misused.
Yeah.
They made the money.
Okay.
Now tell me.
So it's like out of my
Yeah.
curiosity, like you have spent decades in forest and observed butterflies for so long. Is there any moment when you felt that a butterfly is also observing you
That was the first
carefully?
question I asked you when you took your course here. Of course.
What's your most memorable moment? Uh,
Still to come.
oh, okay. So talking about bioindicators and forest health, so have there been moments when you felt nature was showing you that something was changing?
Nature wasn't showing me anything. Nature was changing, and I might have happened to observe it.
Tell me
Nature.
more about it, like if when you felt that the changes you can experience those.
Yes, in the 1960s and 70s, in winter over here, the hillsides used to be bare brown and very dry. And nowadays, if you look out, it's full of greenery. And the reason probably is twofold. One is the supply of cooking gas, so people don't need to go and cut fuel wood. And the second thing is that nowadays girls don't want to take care of cattle. So when they marry into a family, one of the except if it's from a very poor, if the girl's family is very poor, then she might have to marry into a family where they have cows. But
Mhm.
if the girl's family has even a bit of standing, they say we're not going to give our daughter where she has to take care of cows or work in the fields. So that is sort of bad work nowadays. When I was young, the more cows you had, the more cattle you had, the richer you were. Today, the more cattle you have, the poorer you are.
Mm.
Things have changed. And that actually was the main, humans and their cattle were the main source of pressure on the forests. And as soon as that pressure was supplemented by cooking gas or dairies using agricultural, wheat stalks and wheat chaff, for fodder
Mm.
and oil cake and stuff. So that's what the dairies are being supplied with. So they don't go to the forest to lop the trees anymore. So the greenery came back and forests started growing again. So in the past 50 years, things have changed a lot for the better, and the hills are much greener than they ever were. And the three reasons is cooking gas, the lack of cattle,
Mm.
and electricity, which is helping with heating in the winter. So they don't go to cut wood to heat themselves, except the very poor people. All the middle class and richer people are using electric heaters. So the pressure on forests is reduced. The challenges that we were experiencing in the 70s and 80s are no longer there.
Yeah, that's interesting to know. I have never thought about it that way. Like, thanks for sharing.
But what you're seeing is a much greener world, or a much greener India than used to be in the 60s and 70s.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And of course, legislation helped, or cutting trees is illegal, etc., etc., etc. All that helped.
Hmm.
But actually, if the humans need it, then whether it's illegal or not, they'll do it. So
Hmm.
if you're feeling cold and you see a dry tree, you'll go and cut it down and warm yourself, no, or your family. But if you have an alternative for warming your family, you won't cut the tree.
Yeah. Wow. So, even after decades of your work, what's that one ecological question that still excites your curiosity? No? Okay.
I don't go in with preconceived notions.
I love that.
I go
I
and
love
see what's
that.
there and then tell you about it and then understand. Yeah.
Okay. Now that I want to move from studying nature or butterflies or forests to creating a place where that knowledge can continue. When people talk about your work, they often talk about species, discoveries, documentation, but another important part of your journey is the Butterfly Research Center in Bhimtal. So, how did the idea of creating the Butterfly Research Center first begin?
When I realized that there was no information available. So, like I said, I had when I went to England. Before that, I was in contact with friends at basically, I had wanted to start identifying moths and stuff. Butterflies, there was a bit of information available, but moths, whatever was available was from the 1890s, and some random stuff, random books from the early 20th century. And much had changed in random publications. So when I started wanting to identify moths, I found that actually there was nobody.
Hmm.
The British Museum was the mecca for identifications, but there was nobody there working on most of the moths. There was one person there working on one couple of families of moths, but the old India hands and all, they had died out. They weren't there anymore.
Hmm.
So then I realized I'd have to build the collection myself and identify, because if you want to talk about bioindicators, if you want to do all that, you need to know exactly which species you're talking about. That has to be reliably identified.
Yeah.
Right? And there was nobody to reliably identify it. So I had to make the collection over here. So for the next 20 years, I built the collection. And now it's a reasonably good reference collection. And now the actual work can start because we know what is what.
Yeah. So, when you started this center, what was your vision? Like, was it like to start a research center or conservation initiative or
It was filling a lacuna. There was no information, no up-to-date information on anything. The last Butterfly book was from 1957, which used the taxonomy of a 1932 book.
oh yeah, that
It was
was a
almost,
gap, big gap.
yeah, there was a huge gap. There was no information available.
Mm-hmm.
So that needed to be filled, and government was not doing it.
Mm.
So and internationally, it was not, nobody was working on it. So it needed to be done.
Mm. So creating and maintaining this kind of collection over decades, requires enormous dedication. What were some of the challenges people may not see behind building something like this?
You really want to know?
Yeah, I am curious
There's a dark side to it.
because that intrigues me. Because as someone
Mm.
who is passionate and who I love, I love doing what I do and everything. So it will be like a big uh, insightful or knowledge sharing if someone wants to, yeah, walk the path you created or something like
Let it be. I say, let it be.
inspirational.
It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter. There are too many negative things. So let it be. I wanted to do many other things in life, but I wasn't permitted to do that. So I ended up doing this, shall we say.
Okay.
Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, because I think something that young researchers rarely listen about these things. We often see final outcomes, publications, discoveries, and recognitions, so called tags, but we don't always see the years of persistence behind
Mm.
creating a place like you created or doing something like you are doing. So that was my curiosity, and if you are not comfortable answering that, that's okay. I respect that.
Okay.
So
In a word, I'll just give it because I don't want to go too deep into this. This is personal, but
doing. So what's that one advice would you give to the young generation or people who are passionate, who wants to do?
the thing is this, that science is based on evidence, right?
Right.
In the case of nature, that evidence is either in the form of samples from plants or specimens. Okay. Um, we have this large section of people who do not want to make the effort. It takes effort, of course. They don't want to make the effort to
Yeah.
curate samples, to maintain databases.
Yeah.
They go around saying, oh, it's wrong to kill insects, it's wrong to do this, it's wrong to do that. I know one government institution where for many years I was telling them, please make collections. Please make collections. I said, please make the boxes. I will give you the specimens. I'll give you the identified specimens. But please, you cannot do this work. You cannot do all this Himalayan research without specimens.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, you see, the government norms forbid us from doing this and all that because of this horrible environmentalist takeover by they didn't let India do anything. And the result today is that we have no database. To put it in a nutshell, for many years I've been telling my friends in that institution that please make collections, reference collections. Without a reference collection, you cannot do research. And they said, no, we can't, because the norms forbid it. And then the person I was friendly with, one of them, so he was the director of that institution. He died during COVID. But the last time I met him, he was director over there. And I met him, it was just a polite visit. Hi, how are you doing? I was driving past. And he said, we did a review of our publications, mostly on plants. And we found that 60% of the plants which we wrote about and did the things on were misidentified. And we don't even have the herbaria so that we can correct those misidentifications and save that data. 60% were based on misidentified plants. Do you understand what that means? It means years and decades and billions of rupees of funding down the drain because some lazy people put out the view that collections are not good and you shouldn't pluck a few leaves from a tree so that it can be confirmed to identify later.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
people take it.
it's astonishing. It's
Yeah.
absolutely astonishing, but that's the
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
what we lack in our country are collections. We don't have herbaria, we don't have insect collections, we have nothing. That's why there's no data. You, I'm participating in a thing called conservation evidence,
Yeah.
which is a British university,
Mm-hmm.
and they have this project. So they are looking for things where conservation efforts should be based on evidence, not on feelings. And I love nature is not a qualification.
Yeah, there should be an evidence.
Yeah, you need to know more about the subject. Then you need to know more about the subject to qualify as an expert. So there are efforts and in this conservation evidence, it's not only looking at what has been published, but all the areas that have not got any publications, where they are blanks. Nobody has done any publications on those aspects of conservation. So that is a major lacuna in our country. We don't have collections. People come here and say, "Oh, this room is unique where the collection is." They look around and they say, "This room is unique in India." And I say, "That's a pity. We should have a room like this in every town, every village. We need to monitor our wildlife to be able to conserve it. If you don't know about something, how can you protect it?
Yeah.
Tiger is an umbrella species and a nodal species. This is all rubbish. These are all excuses to justify your lack of knowledge,
Mm.
isn't it?
Yeah, I completely
I
agree
mean,
with
you do a lot of research on a particular butterfly or a moth or whatever, and according to current day classification, it's a widespread common species, and then a new comes along like DNA, and suddenly you find that widespread common species is a complex of 3 or 5 species.
Mm.
If you don't have the specimens, you have to throw all the data out.
Yeah.
Right? But if you have the specimens, okay, you can figure out which information goes with which species. So this whole I don't know what to call it, but this whole movement against collecting
Yeah.
and saying insect collectors pose a threat. This is done by a insecticide manufacturer. They
Mm.
generated a wave of like in India we've had this cockroach Janta Party,
Yeah.
which generated a wave because there are a lot of people sitting in the background generating that wave. So the same way, this whole movement against collections in Europe also was
Mhm.
started basically by a drug company, an insecticide manufacturer who bought a patent for glyphosate in 1974. And by 1976, they started campaigning against insect collectors. By
Mm.
1983, they had insect collections banned.
Yeah.
And then it turned out that insect populations collapsed because of this pesticide that they were spraying everywhere. They made a lot of money, but they completely destroyed the insects in Europe. And of course, everything that depends on them. Insectivorous birds had collapsed by 95% in Britain.
Mm. That's
Right. So yeah, and they disguise it, and people foolishly believe it. It's like these animal rights activists. Animal rights is a complete fraud. Animal rights was used by Hitler.
yeah.
Hitler was the person who legitimized animal rights for the first time. Hitler's government, and
Yeah.
they used it to persecute the Jews. They justified that.
Yeah. It's also like a brainwashing, like an entire.
Exactly. So these so-called leftist ideas, they're poison.
Yeah.
They're poison. Basically, animal rights, the game was the way the Hitler played it and the way they played it in India with the stray dogs
Yeah.
was that first they go around telling you that everybody has equal rights.
Yeah.
And the emotional fools
Yeah.
believe that. And they say, oh, yes, that's such a nice thing. Everybody has the same rights. And they let that sink in for 10 years. And after that, then they slowly float the idea that some some people, so people start equating themselves with animals. So, okay, dogs have the same rights as humans, right? Cattle have the same rights as humans. So this, that. When they start equating all humanity with all other life forms, then after 10 years, they float an idea and said some humans are better than other humans. In the case of Hitler, it was the Aryans. And in the case of the animal rights activists, it was the animal rights activist who was better human than other humans. The dog lover was a better human than other humans, right? And then that raised them above the general. And that meant that the rest of humanity was left there along with the animals. And then it justified the killing. So the massacre of the Jews was justified by saying they're subhuman. The humans are the Aryans, and everybody else, the Africans, Asians, whatever, they're all subhuman. So killing them is like killing animals. That is how the German public swallowed the massacre of all that. And they were doing the same thing in India with stray dogs. So if a stray dog kills a child, that's forgivable. Why was the child there? The child shouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
Because these superhuman animal lovers, animal right activists, imagine themselves as superhumans, Aryans, the equivalent of Hitler's Aryans, and they justify the death of little children on the way to school, or old people on the street for whatever reason, and they're getting torn apart by packs of dogs, and that is justified in the eyes of these so-called animal lovers. But they will never take animals home. A dog is a domestic animal. It's not a wild animal. It's a domesticated wolf.
Yeah.
So it needs food, it needs shelter. It has been domesticated. So if you're an animal lover and an animal right activist, don't keep the dogs on the streets. Take them home and take care of them. No?
Yeah, that's true. And that reminds me of like how selective some people are in terms of loving animal. Like there are dog lovers
It
that
turned out it was.
don't care
It
about other
turned out exactly. Dogs are carnivores. They kill others to live. It's the biggest threat to Indian wildlife today is stray dogs.
Yeah.
But it turned out that it's actually a big business. They're getting 200 crores a year donations from abroad.
Mm.
200 crores a year from abroad, and what they're generating within the country from government programs to castrate dogs. That's again running into crores. States like Kerala were giving 20 crores a year to castrate dogs. And of course, the dogs are not being castrated because that would be killing the golden goose.
Yeah.
So there was a huge amount of money involved. And when that money racket was exposed, then suddenly all these animal rights activists disappeared. You don't have any animal rights activists anymore. They've all become animal welfare specialists. Because animal welfare is what our constitution meant under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animal Rights
Yeah.
Act.
I feel
So
like that's another area of discussion. Also, like I need to make part two of our conversation. It's yeah.
I'm not heading, there are other people who are doing that. I can put you in touch with them, but I definitely helped a little bit with that.
Yeah, it's unfolding another area.
Layer of evil. This is evil. This is nothing else. It's nothing to do with respect or love or care or anything. It's just evil. Evil is always disguised as good. No? Evil never comes along and says, I'm evil. Evil comes along and says, oh, I'm really good and this and that. And later on, you find out that actually they were doing something else.
Yeah. That's so true.
Hitler was madly popular. Hitler was madly popular in Germany. No?
Yeah.
But where he led them.
Yeah. So okay. So collection is important, and having that set of like foundational knowledge is important to like continue doing conservation and this kind of work. So I want to conclude with a question about that. You have spent decades, like I said. Imagine a young person, young naturalist opens your field notes 100 years from now. What do you think they understand from your life's work, your collection or notes or the knowledge you generated? Do you think there's
Most of my, sorry, do I think what?
there's a hope like they would understand?
In every generation, there are people who are doing what I'm doing, and there are people who are doing what the others are doing in every generation. Sometimes the people who are doing what I'm doing, we are numerous, we hold the stage, and sometimes they hold the stage. At the moment, they hold the stage. That's okay. That doesn't mean that the work will stop. And in every generation, there are people who are doing it on both sides, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's just a question of who's being listened to, who's harnessed the narrative, who's
Yeah,
peddling what,
it's
isn't it?
all about the narrative and
Yes.
understanding
Yes.
in that way.
Yeah.
So at the Soaring Tales, we believe every species has a story, and after a lifetime spent listening to nature, if nature could have that one message, could leave humanity, that one message would, what would you think it would say? Like, because especially you are so connected, and I see you in that way, that you have a lot.
Well, so basically, the one message which should emerge out of all the understanding and all that is that unfortunately the interpretation of the Abrahamic religions is that humanity and nature are separate. But actually, it's not true. We're very much part of the whole thing. And in fact, the word nature, this whole concept of nature, Francis Bacon, he was one of the origin when this thing called science was being in its infancy. So they wanted to basically find out what is relatable, what is reliable, what is repeatable.
Mm,
And the aim was to exploit nature, how best to exploit nature. It wasn't really to find out dry truths. Isaac Newton and all were doing that. But there was another, the opposite side, which was talking about how to exploit nature. But the word nature only came up much relatively recently. In the 12th, 13th centuries, there was no concept of mother nature and all. That's a concept that came in the 16th, 17th centuries. There was nothing because basically you lived in according to the seasons, according to the local resources, and you might have some light luxuries that were imported from far away because transportation was not easy. Then, so you lived in tune with nature. So there was no need to call it something else. You were meant you lived in tune with nature. When
I
things
love,
began to change,
yeah, I love how you said this. And it's like it was so holistic. Like
yeah,
we were
exactly,
we were a
exactly.
part
So
of nature. So there was
still are, we still are. We're not separated. It's just the people who are making money on it who want us to imagine that we are separate from nature and stuff like that. They're making money on it. They want us to say, they don't want us to say, hey, why are you doing that? Or why are you doing this?
yeah.
No. It's humans and nature is separate. We are in the form of gods. But Jesus never said that. He said he's son of God, but he never said he's God.
Yeah.
We are all children of God, including the birds and everybody of creation or whatever you want to call it. Isn't it? That part was obscured by the priests.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your wisdom, and thank you so much for sharing your journey, your knowledge and reflections. So
It's a pleasure.
your work reminds that it's not only about only working in labs and generating data that is the only important thing, but it's also about curiosity, patience, and the willingness to learn and observe and doing things in a more holistic
Yes,
and
laboratories are just for testing what you have
yeah,
observed in nature.
that's a part of doing
Hmm.
something,
It's a part.
one way of knowing thing. There are diverse ways.
Exactly. Yeah. If
uh,
you start in the lab and then go out to cherry pick data and come back to justify it in your lab, you're doing things the wrong way around.
yeah.
You should go out first, get a question, then bring that stuff if necessary. Then bring that stuff into your lab and observe it to understand what is going on in nature, not the other way around.
Yeah, thank you so much for all the knowledge sharing today. And thank you
Lovely.
everyone for watching. To those who are joining us today on the Soaring Tales, if you enjoyed this conversation, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And yeah, until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep flying high. And see you next time. Take care. Bye.
Namaste. God bless.